Thank you for allowing us to interview you for the Collective Action magazine, and allowing us to have this critical, important conversation post the second presidential summit on gender-based violence. I just wanted to ask if you could please introduce yourselves, and then we can get into the conversations.
I'm Advocate Mikateko Maluleke. I'm the Director General of the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities.
I am Mmabatho Ramagoshi. I'm the advisor to the Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities.
Thank you so much. So just to start off the conversation, we've heard from the different pillars. It's more so, I think, pillar 4. There were a number of concerns raised, Oguti. As much as this is an inclusive structure, the mandate is for us to be inclusive. There is still concern based on civil society, Oguti. We still have children left behind. We still have people with disability left behind. Even the LGBTQI community was still advocating. They still have concerns. They feel still left behind in terms of being involved, fully involved in the whole gender-based violence and femicide space. What's your take on it? Are we seeing the same thing? Are we experiencing the same problem? I understand the department is working very hard, but there's perhaps maybe lack of communication or something. I don't know. What would you say is the disjuncture there?
Mmabatho will come in because she was involved even at the beginning of the development of the National Strategic Plan, but I would like to address this area that yes, we are a department that is responsible for women, youth and persons with disabilities, not on gender-based violence and femicide only. When we focus on women, it's because of the history of women in South Africa, or the history of discrimination and insubordination and abuse of women. Hence, women are a special focus. But also when we say women, we mean women in all their diversity. Binary, non-binary, non-conforming, all of them. And also youth, we know we have challenges, and persons with disabilities. However, in the approach of addressing gender-based violence, even addressing the empowerment of women, we don't leave men outside. They are also responsible for the empowerment of women. They are also responsible to partner with all of us to end gender-based violence. So is the focus women as a recipient for promotion or empowerment, because they have been disadvantaged and discriminated against for a long time. So to address the accumulated disadvantage and all those, that is why we focus on women. But it's not on the approach of our work. Men and women and everyone has to ensure that we empower women, we address gender-based violence together. Gender-based violence will not end if men and women do not participate. I would like to hand over to Mmabatho to indicate why children were not included, but with the LGBTQIs, they're included and they participate, yes. Maybe even before Mmabatho comes in, but she'll talk to that. The challenge with civil society is that because they don't have an umbrella body, others participate, others feel we're not included. All of them want to participate on an individual basis, and that becomes impossible. Let me hand over to Mmabatho.
And agreeing with what Joyce is saying, you know, the first summit, in terms of inclusivity, we all had women in their diversity, including LGBTQI. The issue of children was discussed even at the first summit. And the discussion went, and people felt strongly that children do not belong in the NSP because there is an act that covers children, that talks to children's protection. So there is legislation already that protects children. So it was about focusing on women and the legislation or the framework that seeks to ensure that they get their services. So there is no exclusion. if you look at the issue of pillar, you go into pillar 4, but in pillar 2, when we talk about parenting, we were very deliberate that men, which are fathers, must be part of prevention. And we looked at the issue of boy children, that because some of them don't have father figures, they end up being abusive. So it depends on who you are talking to at that time. But in the development of the NSP, all these issues were discussed, and the issue of children, because the children's rights movement wanted children to be involved, and people said, but you have an enabling legislation, so why can't you use that legislation to protect children against gender violence and femicide?
So on that note, we've interviewed a few individuals from the justice system, and they are lobbying for inclusion. And we've heard through the grapevine that there's also a movement to have a Pillar 7 included in the NGBV collective. Now, considering the fact that you're saying that there is a legislation that covers the children and they have no place in the NSP, how is this going to plan out?
Maybe before Mmabatho comes in, I think there is a misunderstanding that the NSP doesn't cover children. The Department of Basic Education is also part of the End Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Collaborative, because the prevention is prevention for all South Africans, whether females or children or LGBTQIs, is prevention for all. Response for services is response for all. So Pillar 7, I'm not sure is a pillar that will just say children, but what about children? Because all the 6 pillars do cover children, even though they are not. I think, in fact, they are mentioned. That's why the Department of Basic Education is involved, because they have to ensure that they report on ending gender-based violence at the schools. But I will hand over to Mmabatho also to respond, and following what she had said.
Like you said, there is a recommendation that goes that says Pillar 7, and we I mean, for me, we have opened a discussion at the Conference of Accountability, where not every person who was even involved in the first summit was here. So the Pillar 7 discussions, if this is going to go to the public, because again, we've got people here who says, let's have children. And as Joyce is saying, when we look at Pillar 2, it includes everybody. Besides that, there is social development. Besides that, basic education. Besides that, there is social justice in terms of the law. The law does not say because you're not a child, you are not benefiting. However, as there is dedicated resources that are put aside to ensure that children get services from early childhood development, for services that caters for them in schools. So we are bringing a pillar that will stand on its own in the absence of legislation that empowers children. So I'm agreeing with Joyce. I'm not sure when they say children are going to be added. I saw there was a recommendation that says the children must be in the council. How will a child be in the council? Because this council is a council that is going to have legislation. And when you sit in the board, you must actually be an adult to sit in the board, because you must take responsibility of accounting to the finances that are going to be being given to the council. So we want children to start managing while they are not at that level. So I saw, for me, those 2 recommendations were a problem, because I don't think people understand that the council is not a representative where people raise their hands and become there. We are going to first say your experience in finances, so you can be in the council, your experience in GBV, because we want people who will be able to make sure that this council hold accountable people who are delivering on services on violence against women and children. So I mean, I think another problem that we're having now, as we use the language of GBVF, we're forgetting that actually we're talking about violence against women and children, because it's violence that men are meted against women and children. So whatever service that we have, we must make sure that they get the whether it's justice, but as we more often than not say, we are focusing on the response and not on prevention, because if we prevent, we're not even saying how do we respond to gender-based violence, how do we make children to be on board, because they've got their voices. And social development, as we stand, is the custodian of that legislation and giving children voices.
So I think maybe just understanding what you're saying, the mandate of a pillar is to execute on the key performance indicators that are stipulated, that will be stipulated in the National Strategic Plan. Now, how do we hold minors accountable? Because I'm sure that collective will be made of institution, individual bodies that that look after minors, including organizations that are minor-led. I would like to think schools, they do have charity organizations, they do have movements, initiatives. How do we hold them accountable to the outcomes for that particular pillar? That would be probably a challenge.
For the children.
For the children, yes.
Maybe let's indicate the pillars. Pillar 1 is accountability. It doesn't say women or whatever, it says accountability. And it's accountability by government, by civil society, by labor, by private sector, even individuals. Because gender-based violence will not end if we say it's the state only, because the state comes in after the fact. Pillar 2 is on prevention. Pillar 3 is on response. Where people have to be arrested and all those. Pillar 4 is on care and support. Pillar 5 is on economic power. Pillar 6 is on research. So that's why we say, what will Pillar 7 say? Children. What about children? Because children also have to be incorporated in all that. But we didn't say women or whatever in those. It's the services that are supposed to be received or the areas that need to be strengthened in order for us to be able to respond, but also prevent gender-based violence or end gender-based violence. So children are not excluded, but it's just that because people who are here do not understand, and some of them were not there. That's why now they want to see specifically your migrant workers, your migrant women, they want to see the LGBTQIs, they want to see children, and they don't understand that they are already covered there. The service providers need to make sure that they improve on the services. Yes, Mmabatho.
But even on Pillar 5, economic power, when we're talking about the workplace sexual harassment, there is mention of LGBTQI, because people were, as we're saying, it's about services. People were very clear that whatever is happening now is excluding all these marginal groups. So when we speak about workplace, make sure that now workplace does not discriminate against women, also LGBTQI, because others in their hiring patterns might exclude based on sexual orientation. So we totally agree with Joyce that when you say children, there is no pillar that says women, there's no pillar that says men. It's pillars about services, because the context of the summit was that actually South Africa is not short of legislation. From the constitution to all other legislations, what we're lacking is implementation. So how do we ensure that we implement and hold government accountable for lack of implementation? So if you just want to lift a sector of society as if it's about people only, but it's about services and holding government accountable to the laws that they've put in place but not implementing.
And holding also civil society organizations, because if you are funded, you have to account. True. No one receives the money and just do as they please. Some of them that were shouting here today, it's because the money was stopped because they do not want to account. if you submit a proposal and say, I'm going to implement 1, 2, 3, 4, in order for me to be able to continue giving you the money, you need to account. So it's government, labor must account, because we're talking about workplace safety for women and whatever. Labor also has to be involved. Private sector has to account, but also violence happens in the mines and everywhere else where private sector is responsible. So everyone has to account. Even families have to account. We know, we see violence at home. Somebody indicated that they say, forgive your uncle, forgive whoever. How do you do that being a parent? So all of us have to account. So the NSP and the National Council will assist us to be able to facilitate at a national level, provincial level, and at local level. But it doesn't mean that everyone is going to be represented. Even though we say 51% civil society, 49 government, even government departments, not all of them are going to be represented, but it doesn't mean that they are not accountable. They might not be represented in the council, but they have to implement.
And I think just the issue of council is critical. Because, you know, when yesterday in one of the sessions, somebody, I think, just misheard what the president said, that we were speaking of the SANEC. At the first summit, it was very clear that we do not want a loose structure. The structure that must be put in place must be a structure that can be held accountable, and even legal, if it's criminally held accountable. That's why I'm saying, what will children do? Because in terms of the board, now it's a board, so if a board mismanage funds, they are held individually accountable according to the Companies Act. So why would you want a child to be held accountable, criminally accountable, if they don't even understand how the board is run? And when you say 51% and 49, we're talking about 13 people. That's another thing that people don't understand. We were deliberate that we don't want a structure that is so cumbersome like SANAC, that is not going to assist in holding government accountable. And as we are saying, private sector, anybody who's implementing the NSP. So it's 13 people whose job is to ensure implementation of the NSP, because they are not implementers. Ensuring that everybody who has indicators that talks to them implement the NSP, and then they will report and say to the president, so and so is not doing it, maybe this is our recommendations. So there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. And if you look at the reports that come from provinces, the reports are indicating that many people still don't know the NSP. So because they don't know the NSP, they will come with many additions that they want to hear. They don't know the content. They now hear there's an NSP, so they are thinking you can just add and add on. And I don't think that's the way to go.
But also to add, I think there's a misunderstanding, because Professor Shisan was saying they're going to coordinate from the DG in the presidency, highest office, children's issues. That's a separate issue from the NSP. The fact that they're going to be coordinated at the private office doesn't mean that they have to be included in the NSP. These are two different things.
Because it's really giving them a champion, but in terms of service and programs, those programs are residing in a department. So now, as we're speaking, the Department of Social Development are the custodians of children's legislation and children's issues. So if they take the rights and to the highest office, still does not take away all the budget and resources in terms of human resources that are in social development. So I think there still needs to be a discussion of how do they understand what it means to have children representing themselves, and how and where do they think in this NSP the voice of children was left out, because it was never meant to have children in the NSP.
I think we need to have a more robust conversation with the other side that wants to set up the pillar, so that we can understand each other. And I think you're absolutely right that until now, we are still struggling as a collective to understand what the NSP really is. And I think more conversations need to go into this. But thank you so much.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, sure.
Can I say one thing that I think Joyce touched, and that is a problem that we are facing, and the collective now it's a voluntary collective, yes, of individuals, CSOs, faith-based. Now the challenge that we're having is that because of the lack of a national a body that represents women, a body that represents children. So every time there is somebody who wants just to say, what about this? We've got CSOs now who are dealing with issues of gender-based violence. They come and go because they also have their own issues that they need to address. But as we have engagements, every time we have engagements, they say, but why do you have Joyce? Because mine is not there. So when people say government is not including us, it's not because of the majority of any, because I am not part. So until we have, in the country before, we had very strong coordinating body, whether it was networks or coalitions. So you knew who you are talking to, and they were representing constituencies. But now, because of the lack of that, there is always a friction of who speaks on behalf of who. Because you cannot speak on behalf of 52 million South Africans if you got no mandate. So you can only speak about your organization because there nobody is sent to.
I think just to add, the questions today, you saw when they were, all of them wanted to ask questions, even if a similar question has been asked. It's because they don't see themselves as all representing each other. So it's like, it doesn't matter whether she said it or not, I want to go and say it. So today there was 1,300 people. So there's no way all of them could be given an opportunity. Even 600 couldn't be given opportunity to ask questions. So if they are able to form or to be able to act collectively, then they can say, what are the most 3 or 4 or 5 important things that we want to raise, so that somebody, they agree how many people are going to represent them. No, all of them want to ask, and that's why sometimes they become unruly, and if somebody speaks, they will, hurt the person, or so those are some of the challenges that we have. But also the last one, some of the civil society, somebody asked the question, how you don't include the NGOs that are not NPOs. So how do you form an NGO and want to be recognized if you are not registered in any form? Because it's not, the social development doesn't recognize NPOs only. Even the section 29, they recognize them. So some people want to be NGO, but they are not structured. How do I give you the money, or how do I trust you to render a service if we are not registered? We end up with the life many issues and whatever, because they also have to be professionalized. They're not professionalized. They operate individually and whatever.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. You've cleared the air on a lot of things.
Okay.
I think a lot of it just goes to understanding. And if people could take time to actually understand the strategic plan,
Read it.
It might just help. But thank you so much. We will do a follow-up conversation around this.
Okay.
Definitely. But for now, thank you so much. And thank you for allowing us to interview you.
She wouldn't let go.